I can't tell you whether I'm all about anything profound or fascinating today. The little discussion last week kind of got my brain moving about films that I liked, especially kind of, if you will, small ones. And a couple came to mind a little later than when I was talking about before. So I'm pretty certain that films of this kind are made in an ongoing, occasional fashion. And one that I remembered is from 1996. It's called Big Night. Fantastic. I mean, again, this is all about don't look it up. Okay. I mean, don't go running off and clickety clicking and, finding out everything and who said what about it and stars this and tomatoes that. And do yourself a favor and not do that and say, I'll see that film. What else are you going to do yourself in the particular evening? I mean, come on. So there's that. And 1997, this one may or may not kind of fit. It occurred to me. It's called The Castle. It's an Australian film. Finally, 2000, a film that really was, unlike many, struck home extremely powerfully for me and a number of people who saw it with me or thereafter. It's called You Can Count on Me. And again, I think that could easily rank up there in my grab bag of fave films. So there you go. A few more tossed out there in hopes that somebody somewhere might actually cold with no preparation, discussion, or orientation at all. Well, faint hopes aside, what else could we discuss? It is the 75th anniversary of the deployment of atomic weaponry upon Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I urge you to learn a bit more. I urge you to look at the pattern and the approach of bombing prior to that, using what I suppose we now call conventional weaponry at the time. And today, too, an extraordinarily destructive firestorm, even without those two weapons. And so learning more about that. And also, I urge you to learn more about the history of negotiations between the Japanese government and the United States government during 1944 and 1945. So I'll leave you with those things to check out when and if you get around to it. I have plenty of insights to continue with from there for those who care. Now, anything else fascinating or whatever? Or can I talk about Swedish stuff, which is always charming? I can rhapsodize about our immediate ecology, local ecology, with the grapes coming up along the fence in the front and the black currants, happily contributing to our buckets right now. And then the crop o' apples, which, unlike last year, the trees having been trimmed, this year is returning with a vengeance, and I will certainly be carting off loads and loads and loads and loads of apples off to the place where they make apple stuff to be rewarded with script for the store and to come back full of arms loaded with saft and jam and so on. We're still drinking buckets of strawberry saft that we made from the pick your own fields nearby. So plenty of that sort of thing to enjoy and, celebrate as part of our lifestyle here. But what else comes to mind? I'd have to say that I was being biological, and some friends contacted me about something I had said in an interview and wanted to follow up on that in terms of teaching. They were like, how did you teach that to students? And so we had a pedagogical discussion, but it kind of jarred me a little to, get into stuff I'd liked to think about all the time earlier. And this I actually went into in some detail in my book, The Edge of Evolution. So I guess it's really kind of lame for me to, sit here and repeat it. But I do have a favorite human, and I thought it might be fun to share it with people who haven't read the book, which shock, there may be a few of you out there. And then also, it was featured a bit on my little bio blog for a while there. But anyway, Paranthropus is the genus of human-like, closely human-related creatures in our primate history. It gives rise to a number of larger points, which is that Homo sapiens, our species worldwide, is the single representative of a fairly speciose group of primates, not just scattered few, but rather, a fair spray. For a mammal of our size, to have a spray of, a dozen species is not too untypical. And also for a mammal of our size, for that group to have gone through a fairly extensive mass extinction event, not one of the truly huge ones, but a consequential one for our group, and in which many large mammal assemblages, which is to say a whole bunch of related species classified variously in genera as well and so forth. Anyway, assemblages of mammals on the big side do not do well in mass extinctions. They die off more than other ones do, and often are left with no representatives, and often are left with one or two species that have persisted to this day or until recent history. And you can look around all you want to. I mean, there used to be tons of species of elephantids. There used to be tons of species of large felines, and a whole bunch of others, lots and lots. And many of them are represented only by one or two species today. And our assemblage is one of those. So instead of thinking of Homo sapiens as the champion, that beat all the other ones, just think about us as the species that is persistent through that mass extinction. And you can even say, hey, wait a minute, doesn't that still mean we beat them, the losers? And the answer is, well, no. There are certain factors that are associated with persisting through a mass extinction of your assemblage. And one of them has to do with population abundance. One of them has to do with population spread, broad range across different habitats. Another one has to do with reproductive habits, which is to say physiology. And another one has to do with diet and your capacity to consume, persist upon a variety of things. So if you're in that situation, which you may associate, for example, with wild pigs or with rats and any number of other animals, which we like to dignify as especially noble and wonderful, humans are that kind of ape. And so looking across the assemblage of the species as we understand them now and thinking, well, which one of those, put the whole thing, through a hot, hair dryer of mass extinction, and which one is going to kind of, stumble up and find a few of itself still around. And that would be us, quite predictably, and nothing particularly special or different from the pattern that we observe across multiple other examples. Anyway, so that's sort of the big picture of, the human assemblage and why there's, one species today. And the ability to impose or project triumphalism onto that seems unlimited. You just cannot get past discussions of human evolution, of how we survived and how we achieved and how we do this and how, everybody else gets to kind of evolve, but we, we evolved ourselves, man, all that kind of stuff. So getting past all that is insanely difficult. One of the examples I like to give, to get back to my fave species or group, Paranthropus. Now, this species or group, there appear at least to have been two species. At the fossil level, that kind of classification is largely a matter of convenience. So, shall we say, two for sure. Um, okay, so first of all, where are they in this arrangement of critters that we're talking about? Bear in mind that we talk a lot about how closely we, Homo sapiens, is related to chimpanzees. Okay? All the groups I'm going to talk about right now are way more closely related to us that we're part of them than to the chimps. So, really, we're talking a tight group of very closely related species. And the earliest ones of the kind that we like to think of as usness, as I think everybody here listening knows, is Australopithecus. And these little fellows, they kind of go in and out of the fashionable discussion at the archaeologist, anthropologist, and paleontologist interface, which, believe me, is, boy, you want to talk about the tar pits. Okay, well, so treading carefully through the sticky ground of those discussions, we find a critter who is standing much like we stand, and who is proportionally, arms and legs and stuff, not precisely the same as us, but standing how we stand. So get over this whole hunched over thing and evolving toward bipedalism thing and all that nonsense. There they are, walking around pretty much like we do. And with our heads, canted the way ours are canted on top of our necks, and with the knees knocked the way ours are, and anything else you want to name. So here they are, walking around. Well, wait a minute. What about, are they little people? And it's like, well, I think so. But they have heads that are indistinguishable from those of chimpanzees, with one exception, aside from the foramen magnum, the hole there. But the big exception is the tooth row. Their teeth are ours. I mean, they've got our tooth row. We have theirs. So there we go. That's the critter. And they're, as far as we can tell, dashing about, because our type of critter is a good runner, especially long distance, which is an unusual thing, really. And if you want to talk about human tricks, stupid human tricks, that's a solid probably top of the list. It's kind of the jogging that we can do. Anyway, so there's lots of talk about how they must have done a whole lot of that. But anyway, so that's them. And there's a bunch of different Australopithecus, and they persist all over the place. They're scattered widely across, central, southern, eastern Africa, and can be, understood as a major radiation of this kind of creature. Well, they do not overlap with us in our paleontological history. There's a fair gap from the latest Australopithecus that we've seen and the earliest Homo sapiens that we've seen. Although, it's paleontology, so, it can turn around sometime and, trip over a bone, and it's like, oh, it's this guy's from such and such a time. But the gap that I'm talking about is really, really, really big. And so I doubt we're going to fill that in between those two groups, Australopithecus and Homo, anytime soon. But there's lots of other things going on. And one critter whose longevity in biological species terms actually overlaps with the end of Australopithecus and with the beginning of Homo is Paranthropus. Just from that, you might say, aha, step on the ladder, right? A, C, oh, there's B. No. We're not talking about that at all. We're not talking about a ladder. We're talking about an assemblage, a spray. And Paranthropus is great because it is another way to be a person completely. Now, what are we talking about? First of all, take an Australopithecus, right? Basically a little person, right? With, the skull in the right position as far as we're concerned, and the posture and the walking and stuff, very much like we're familiar with talking about it and looking at it and doing it, except that it is this chimpanzee configuration of the skull, of the head. This whole like bald part that you're looking up there, it's not there. So anyway, the Paranthropus No, let's go back to us. Let's just, for comparison, we'll just talk about us. Take that Australopithecus, grow the whole thing up a bit. So it's just a bigger creature, right? Neck down, still talking about, that. We don't know anything about the external features. We don't know about the hair. We don't know about breasts or dugs or anything like that. The rather shocking human male equipment that does not match to apes like the gorilla and chimp and so forth like that. We don't know anything about that for the species we're talking about. So as far as clothing the bones is concerned, and the things that our eyes are drawn to, the size of the iris, right? So the big old whites of the eyes kind of thing. We don't know what the species I'm talking about had for any of that stuff. And conventions that we have, which is to make Australopithecus fuzzy and all species of Homo unfuzzy and stuff like that, it's all made up. So anyway, if you then take that Australopithecus and say, well, what do you do? How are we different? And the answer is what I just indicated. You take a bicycle pump and you go and you blow up this cranium, right? In fact, we talk about the brow ridges, right? And how we don't have brow ridges. Yes, we do. It's the cranium going in front and overwhelming the brow ridges, which produces the modern human look, not the lack of the brow ridges. So anyway, that's what happens, right, with that crew. And that crew includes some interesting, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, Homo heidelbergensis, all sorts of critters in the genus Homo, all of which have this inflated cranial effect in one degree or another, but always, you look at the skulls, you're like, oh, okay, these guys, bam, they go there. It's real easy. But Paranthropus did something different with the Australopithecus body and head. Again, neck down, fine, and like Homo, get bigger. Okay, so think of a big Australopithecus. Then what happens? What is the big change? Paranthropus is often pilloried as the small-brained one. Well, it's not, because its brain is precisely the right proportion to its body for an Australopithecus, which happens to be the same as for a chimp. But the point is that its brain doesn't get small. The point is that when the whole critter gets bigger, the brain doesn't get any more big from there. So you still have the very chimp configuration of the top of the skull, but wait for it, there's more to come on that score, because the jaw, the lower jaw, which for Homo is shockingly fragile or just minimal. We have a really weak mandible, this really thin thing, right? Really, it's infantilized. We know that. We've maintained the infant configuration of the skull throughout our lives, and so we have this really, really weak jaw, and particularly for Homo sapiens. And if you look at Paranthropus, that's precisely the thing that has changed. If you run your finger along here so that you can feel the edge of your jaw, drop it substantially, like that much. Drop it way down so it's practically obscuring the neck from view. Drop that jaw, not like with your mouth open, but just extend the bone, the thickness of the mandible all the way down here. So the mandible is just huge as an element. And also, same tooth row, but the teeth are bigger overall, and they're bigger especially in the molars. So the grinding surface of each molar is easily 4 times as any one of ours. So across the number of molars with that much more grinding area, and you have this immense amount of tooth contact for chewing, tooth on tooth grinding like molars do. And let's do one other thing. Put your finger there. That's the masseter muscle. And in us, it fits real nicely into this fossa, which is a concavity in the mandible. And as you know, you chew, it's the guinea pig muscle, right? There you are, chewing away back there. And then there's another muscle, the temporalis, which basically extends up your temples onto the top of your head. And in humans, there's some light musculature, barely reaching up near to the top, right around to here. And that anchors the muscles, which make the jaw go up and down at a slightly different angle. The actions of those two sets of muscles is what gives you your jaw mobility. So all mammals have them. I mean, these are ordinary muscles. So in Paranthropus, remember what I said about the jaw? By the way, that corner of the jaw too, it's like this, it's this big element of the jaw, this corner back there. And the concavity, the mandibular fossa, is, it's like a golf ball, right? I mean, you can like fit a golf ball in there. And the implication is that the masseter muscles are just extraordinarily powerful. And this creature has a feature that you don't find in any other species in this assemblage. You do see it in some other apes, particularly the gorilla, but this is the only one of the bipedal fellows that I'm talking about that has it, which is a sagittal crest of bone, right, running here, and that is an anchor for temporalis muscles. So therefore, its temporalis muscles also must have been extraordinarily thick and strong compared to our fairly feeble ones. So, and when I say fairly feeble, I don't know if you've ever looked up just how much pressure humans can put into a bite. Now think of Paranthropus and what it can do with a good solid chomp, with these phenomenal, bone and muscular, assemblages or arrays for chewing. So it's pretty fascinating. I mean, this is a creature who, we're not going to call it an idiot, because all of these creatures are part of our little group, and our little group is part of what we like to call the great apes. Not a group known for being stupid, right? We're talking about bright mammals from the get-go. They all count. So with all this together, we have a really, really interesting animal. We actually don't know much about how they lived. We know a little bit. We don't know much. Later, Homo has a way of littering, right? So even, the archaeological, paleontological remains of Homo has a way of like leaving crap all over their campsites. And so then the fossils of other things get all mixed up with that. And so it's really kind of hard sometimes to tell what on earth some of the earlier groups were doing. Were they using this, or was that, thrown on the heap by, some dude? Anyway, again, why don't we think of these guys as losers? They were obvious. They weren't big brained. Is that why they died out, right? Were they replaced? Did we beat them? What happened? Now, there's a couple of interesting points about this. One is that the longevity of the entire group of Paranthropus, which we know of a couple species, and there may have been more, or maybe one of the species we have really ought to be subdivided or something, but there's not that many species. Certainly less known than Homo. We're talking about 1.5 million years that they persisted across Central Africa. That's a really long time compared to our species longevity as of this moment. That's a really long time compared to our species longevity as of this moment. Even if you bust it back to not just Homo sapiens, but the related members of Homo, we are nowhere near the longevity. I mean, you take one of those species of Paranthropus and you look at its longevity, you look at ours, and we are pikers. So we have no call whatsoever to talk about who survived, who won, who beat who, or anything like that. I mean, even without global warming, nuclear holocaust, even without all of that, we have no particular reason to suspect that we would last anywhere near as long as Paranthropus. So to me, they are utterly fascinating. They're a way to be human that we have a very hard time understanding, that we have a very hard time analogizing to, relating to, matching to ourselves. And they were around a really long time, and there are a whole bunch of them, and a really interesting group. If I could do it over again, I look back and say, that's a whole bunch of question marks just hanging out right there. could have done something. Who knows? Well, I hope somebody does. Have a good day. Stay safe and all.